Hello and welcome. I'm Judy Ironside and I'm the founder and president of UK Jewish Film. And I'm delighted to be here today to introduce Masel Tov Cocktail and have this opportunity to discuss the film and his work with Arkadij Khaet. Arkadij, I just wanted to say a few words. I mean, to me, memorialization of the Holocaust is just so important, using the power of film. So your film has really made an impact, and I'm very proud that we have chosen to screen it today, and we're going to be offering this opportunity to watch your film to so many new audiences. So please, can you talk about your film and initially what was the catalyst to make this film? I know that you were born in Moldova and your family emigrated to Germany. So maybe that's the starting point for our discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for inviting, and also thank you for asking me that question, because of course my own biography is somehow linked to the film and also to the film's protagonist. Like you said, I was born in early 90s in Moldova, in the former Soviet Union. It still was the Soviet Union. So my family is speaking Russian. It was a Jewish family. And we came to Germany, I think I was a couple of months old. We came as so-called quota Jewish refugees to Germany. And I grew up in Germany. I went to school here. And after school, I went abroad. I thought about what should I do? What should I study? And I came back, and I think it was a lack of ideas why I started to study film. And, you know, in film school, where the film was made, Masel Tov Cocktail, you know, in film school, professors always tell you, do something personal, do something from your own experience. And I thought, okay, what should I do? And what can I speak about? And I think I wanted to make a film about a Jewish subject, which I would like to see myself. You know, a film from a subjective Jewish point of view. And it all started from the idea, what does it feel like to be Jewish in Germany nowadays? And what kind of experiences we make? You know, we wanted to somehow communicate this feeling through a mix of different, you know, audio, visual, somehow film, like this experiences, you know, this kind of experiences, how our own presence doesn't seem to trigger anything other in the minds of the Germans than the images of the Holocaust. You know, how does it feel to come out to a group as being Jewish and silence the group because they don't know what to say? The experience when people can't pronounce the word Jew, or they pronounce it as a cursing word, right? And I think Jewish life in Germany nowadays consists of many, many things, and much less of what people like to tell about it in German movies and on German TV. And in the beginning, like, we asked ourselves, I think, what do the Germans actually know about Jews? I mean, tell me 5 things except Hitler, Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and maybe Israel, right? And the fact is that in Germany, you have the feeling that you talk about Jewish life, but actually you don't talk about Jewish life, you speak about dead Jews most of the time, right? And the basic problem is, the only reason why Jews in Germany are talked about is the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. And the Germans know the Jews only from the position, we're the perpetrators, you're the victims, and we approach Jewish culture only through that, if we approach it at all.
Can I just interrupt you there?
Yes, sure.
What is your sense of how the Jews in Germany have contributed to this rather, what you're describing as a narrow view of the Jew in Germany?
I think the Jews in general are assigned with a certain role in Germany, right? So a good Jew in Germany is the one who takes away the weight from German shoulders and proves them that they became good and Jewish life is safe and can prosper. And a bad Jew, like in our film, maybe is an aggressive Jew who doesn't fit into this rehearsed theater of commemorating the Holocaust. You know, and you see that through the whole like film history in Germany. In most films, in German television and German cinema, the Shoah is formative for the character's biography, for the character's psychology. And the German film and television after 1945, the most present image of Jews is the one of the victims of the Shoah. Also, there's a visual construction of Jewishness through religious Judaism, right? So in most films, Jews in Germany, they're religious and they are victims. And that's not true, you know. More than 90% Jews living in Germany, they came from the former Soviet Union. They came from secular or atheist families. So they're most of the time wearing a hat and not a kippah. You know, the klezmer is not the soundtrack of their lives. And also they see themselves in a totally different perspective, because we are the people who won the war, you know. We defeated the Germans, and now we are here and we are not necessarily the victims, you know. And I think we won't be happy in this pre-made, you know, place where we are supposed to be. So I think, to answer your question, I think Jews have a very limited repertoire in German film, but this role is changing due to more young native German Jewish voices. And I think maybe a last point, we wanted to make a film about the post-Soviet Russian-speaking Jewish community in Germany, in which I grew up in, and like I said, which makes up the majority of Jews living here, and a topic which is not told in German film at all, you know? So you can't be a migrant and Jewish in Germany on screen at the same time. And it feels like generations of people like in Germany have been raised with this perspective, looking at Jews. And I think that's also a reason why this film is so kind of fresh. And many people say it's something very, very much new to them to see that. And that's why we made the film the way we made it, because like, you know, what I mean is that it consists of this like different facts, and we're explaining a lot, and it's quite educational. Because like the knowledge about Jewish life in Germany is so little, also in German schools and like in German society. That's why we had to use all this like explanation in the film.
If we just go back to the time where you were starting out to gather ideas for Masel Tov Cocktail, one of the things I wanted to comment on was your leading man, your leading figure in the film, Alexander Wartman.
Yeah.
I have to say that I think he was the most perfect casting for the film. His voice is so much, he portrays the voice of Dima so accurately. I mean, I actually found myself thinking he was the filmmaker, that he had written the film. It just feels so authentic. Can you say a little bit about finding Alexander and casting this character?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of the biggest challenges in this whole film process to find Alexander, because we were looking for someone who is Russian speaking, who is in the right age, who is Jewish, and who is, after all, a good actor, right? And when you're looking for this kind of coordinates in Germany, it's quite hard, you know? You don't have many Jews, you don't have many people speaking Russian, and also like in this age to find such a brilliant actor who's like able to take the audience by the hand and lead through the whole film, it's quite a tough thing. And I remember the producers asking me, does he really have to be Jewish? I mean, like, he's an actor, right? He can research, you can rehearse with him. And we thought like, he has to be Jewish, you know, not for symbolic reasons, but the film is written from such a subjective Jewish perspective, and it should be acted from this Jewish perspective also. And I knew if we can find someone who's actually Jewish and who grew up in Germany, he will know all these different characters he's meeting along the way. He will know them from his own private life. And that's exactly what happened. You know, we were looking and we couldn't find someone, and it was just like a coincidence. We found him in a Jewish scholarship, where I'm a scholar also in Germany. And once a year, they are sending a newsletter saying we have new scholars in our scholarship. And I read the name Alexander Wertmann, and he was in first year in acting school in Berlin. And I thought maybe he speaks Russian and maybe he's a good fit. I called Alexander Wertmann and I told him that we're doing a film and what it is about. And he told me that like he's totally unexperienced. He never did a film. He never stood in front of a camera. He was doing theater for the last 6 years, I think. And I kind of had to convince him to do a casting and to meet. And he said, okay, let's meet. So I went to Berlin together with Mickey, the co-director of the film. And we did this casting. And the casting, to be honest, was pretty bad, you know, because like Alexander was playing Dima, like he's performing Shakespeare on stage. Everything was so bright and so loud. And we had to explain to him, you know, we're doing a film. It doesn't have to be so, you know, like in theater. But, you know, the main thing was that, like, when we were speaking about the script with Alexander, and that's also the reason why we took him, and that's also, I think, was the right decision to look for someone who is Jewish, because, like, he knew all the characters. He knew he had the exact teacher, like, is portrayed in the film. He has a very similar family background. He has experience with anti-Semitism. So he wasn't looking for any substitutes, you know, in the filmmaking process, because, like, he had all the situations from his private life. And I think that's why he was able to perform Dima the way we see it in the film.
How did you find your interaction with other members of your cast? For example, the teacher, I'm guessing, and the mother were not Jewish. What sort of discussion did you have with them around the issues that German people present to Jews in Germany?
You know, it's quite interesting, because I think when you read such a script as an actress or an actor, it's quite abstract. You know, you understand what is written there, but you don't have the tone. You don't necessarily can imagine because like Masel Tov Cocktail is made in the editing process, right? I mean, so many like extra footage and all this like things and music. So I think they understood something from the script, but they didn't really, I don't think they got what is the exact perspective when the film will be done. And it was quite easy. I mean, they liked the script. They had a couple of questions, but I mean, they went along with all of it. Yeah, and it wasn't too hard to find them, and it wasn't also too hard to rehearse with them. It was quite an easy process with all the. I think Alexander was the hardest, but all the other ones were quite easy going.
When I think of the 25 years that UK Jewish film has been bringing documentaries and narrative films to audiences across the UK, and the huge archive of Holocaust films that we have shown and that exist, I just wonder, what are your thoughts on the power of shock and reality, and also versus bringing in some realism and humor, which you have done very successfully, I think, in your film. You know, we often think of shock, horror, and sadness and grief as being the most powerful. And I know some people have found films like Life is Beautiful very difficult and disrespectful to the history of the Holocaust, particularly for survivors and second and third generations. But I wonder what your take is on bringing these different emotions into films about the Holocaust.
Yeah. So, you know, first of all, I want to say we never planned on doing a film about the Shoah, about the Holocaust, you know. It's not a film about the past. It's a film about the present. It's a film about like the present Jewish feeling in Germany, in Europe, maybe also nowadays, and how the major society is looking at us, is looking at Jews, and how people are expecting something from you, how people are treating you, how people want you to say certain things. And, you know, I remember, like, from your question, I remember myself being young and being socialized with all these different films, you know, Schindler's List, The Pianist, Life is Beautiful. And I remember myself watching all these films and feeling quite weak, because all you see are Jews which are, you know, in a very weak position, Jews which are hiding, which are beaten up, which are murdered. And when you see it over and over and over again, you start to feel weak, I guess. And I think we need role models which are reluctant, which are resistant. And I think also Jewish history is full of these stories, you know. The thing is that these stories are not really shown to us. You know, all we see in Germany, we don't see like resistant Jewish figures. We see Jewish characters which are beaten up. We see Jewish characters in black and white. So I was always looking for a resistive Jewish character. And I think a film like Inglourious Bastards, I remember myself, it was quite cathartic to watch that and to see there are also Jewish characters which are kind of, fighting back. And I think it's like in terms of having role models, it's very important. And this is like a very difficult, path to walk, because of course the Shoah is formative for most of like Jewish families, and like it's written in like most biographies. So to be clear, I'm not talking about to speak less about the Shoah, not to tell the stories, but I'm speaking at the same time about the fact that we need more characters and more films which make you stronger. And I'm also working for the Jewish Film Festival here in Berlin. I'm watching films, and I'm part of the collective who is curating the film festival. And sometimes it feels like curating a Holocaust film festival, which is quite tough. And of course, like I said, these stories are important. And but I think at the same time, we need to speak about the present, and we need to speak about how do culture of remembrance works in Germany, for example, and how can we criticize it? Because, from a German perspective, you very much can choose, do you remember or do you not? From a Jewish perspective, you just can't, because you have to.
I think we're always dealing, and your film does deal, obviously it is set in the present, but we're always dealing with this lest we forget, and how we must learn the lessons of the Holocaust. But as you say, at the same time, we're looking for an identity that has moved on from the lessons of the Holocaust and the memory of the Holocaust. We still have quite a number of survivors with us, and they give their testimonies, and I mean, it is amazing to have their stories with us. How do you see the scene and the identity of Jews in Germany and across the world changing in the next couple of decades when we no longer have this?
Well, that's a tough question, but I think, first of all, you have to say that I can speak about Germany, right? But also Europe. I think most Germans were busy remembering the past, putting up memorials to immunize themselves in a way for the present. And there is this, made up narrative that all Nazis are gone and the denazification took place. And at the same time, while Germany is so proud of their culture of remembrance, the champions of coping with the past have around 20-25 people with anti-Semitic views, right? That's European average. It's not any better than any other country which doesn't have this like so-called culture of remembrance. And you have to ask yourself, okay, what actually happened, and how is the narrative which Germany is telling themselves, how is that true, or how is it not true? And the thing is, I think it worked for many, many years on an institutional level, on a political level, saying never again. And it kind of became a mere and empty phrase, because it never worked on a private level. Because like the institutions, they kind of, traditionally they remembered, and you have Holocaust Remembrance Days and commemorating the past. And at the same time, the anti-Semitism is rising and rising. When I speak to my Jewish friends, for example, to make it clear, to my Jewish friends, they can tell me like the stories of their grandparents, of their great-grandparents. Most of them know them, like 70, 80, 90, 100 years ago. when I speak to my German friends, people know nothing, So I think it should start on a private level to link the history to also to emotionalize the history also, and to make it visible in your private and your own family. And I think that should be the task. But now I think also there is a change going on, and I think it also coming from Jewish people who grew up here and who are privileged enough now to tell the stories from their own perspective. It's a privilege which my parents didn't have, because my mother and my father, they came to Germany in their 20s, and they had other problems of the migration, find a work, learn the language. And now a generation which is in their late 20s, early 30s, who grew up in Germany and are privileged enough to study decadent things like film, write books, and go into politics, be journalists. And I see it on different corners in Germany, people having a voice, and also changing the narrative and asking questions. Yeah.
We have recently had Luke Holland's documentary, Final Account, has been released in the UK. I don't know if you've seen this, but it was an incredible screening of a film that interviewed old Nazis. And along with the film goes a huge archive of hundreds of hours of these interviews of Nazis, some of them talking with pride about their involvement in the Holocaust. I just wonder about how we deal with the deniers of the Holocaust, and is part of the perpetuation of our identity and our links with the Holocaust connected with this fear of denial, forgetting, which Luke's film very much upholds.
Yeah, I haven't seen the film, but I think in general, the question what you can do with Holocaust deniers and how you can work against anti-Semitism must be answered first and foremost by the non-Jewish society, and not by Jewish organizations, Jews themselves. I think the catastrophic situation we are in now is shown by the shorter intervals between anti-Semitic attacks in Germany also. And I think benevolent words do not help anyone but action, right? And I think, first of all, you have to do more for the security of Jewish institutions. I'm speaking about Germany, right? Also, but in general, the world. There's been too much failure. Also, Jews must be able to live safely in Germany. But the discourse on anti-Semitism, it's very often I'm in film screenings in Germany. So I show the film and the audience start to ask questions and we speak. And then someone goes, yeah, anti-Semitism, it's so horrible. What can we do against it? And they're asking me. And I think this answer should give people, should give the major society. If you ask what can be done against anti-Semitism, then the answer is that everyone must speak up, right? It's not a task of politicians or Jews themselves. It's happening everywhere and in the society. And polarization and spread of hate in the internet, in our families. So anyone who doesn't want to live in this kind of society should speak up, yeah.
And I guess, that we're coming back to your film, this is exactly what Dima is taking on. At the beginning of the film, he punches Toby. And then your decision to end the film with him kicking Toby. I wonder what you're saying with this, how hopeful are you about change?
I'm quite pessimistic, but, also very often I'm wasting my time, especially in German schools, where the film is also shown. I'm wasting my time to debate with teachers about violence in the film. But they're saying, okay, but it's not what should we do? It's not about we can't be violent and we can't break each other's noses. And kick each other's faces. I mean, yeah, right. But, also this was a question in the filmmaking process I had with commissioners who told me, why can't the boys in the end just make up, Why can't they shake hands? And I think this longing for peace between non-Jews and Jews and Germans, it's something which is very inherent in German society. And I think what's interesting about it is that people like to speak about the violence which is coming from Dima, but they don't like to speak about the violence which is coming towards Dima, which is very often non-physical. And for me, in classic cinema, you have the hero's journey. So something happened, and on the way, the hero has to learn something. But in our film, Dima, he's fine. If all the other people from around him, they wouldn't have things they want him to do, and they wouldn't have the cliche thinking and the stereotypical things they say to Dima, then Dima wouldn't have a problem. And that's why I think the film ends the way it started. It starts with a punch and it ends with a kick, because it's not Dima who is the one who has to change, it's the world around him. Yeah.
I know that you're very clear that you're a filmmaker and not an activist. And I respect that. And I know that you're moving on and making a lot more films. I want to just touch on that before we finish. But you won quite a prestigious prize in 2020, I believe, the Civis Media Prize. You had the Top Award and the Young Award. Could you say a little bit about this award and what it meant to you?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I can say that, of course, winning awards is always great, but it's just an award, right? So, I mean, awards, the only thing awards do, they help you to make your films and your work more visible. So people who are seeing that this and this film, this and this filmmaker, they won several awards, then they want to watch the film. Because they think that if a jury said the film is good, then it's probably a good film and we should watch it.
So I think what interested me, it was about the topic of integration. Yeah. Which in many ways is at the essence of your film regarding Jews in Germany and their integration.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, about, okay, we can speak about awards, but we can also speak about integration. The question is because, there is a so-called major society in Germany, and everyone expects you to integrate in the middle of the society. This is how it works in Germany. So everyone should move to the center, right? And we could ask ourselves, why is everyone expecting you to move to the center? Why can't we have a society where everyone is just doing their stuff? And it's a hard question, what is it like to be German and what does it mean to become German? And also from the Jewish community, everyone expects to become a German Jewish community, which is quite tough, with while thinking of the German past. No one really wants to be German. I mean, I think it's different in the UK and also it's different in the States. So yeah, so I don't have the feeling.
It's complicated, I think, in any country, certainly complicated in Britain.
Yeah, but I think, Germany is shaped by strong interest in Jews being integrated in German society, because also it tells the narrative, the story of the continuation of German Jewish Judaism, right? So it's something which is it's in primary interest in German society. Also, when you listen to politicians speaking on somehow Jewish events, they are so proud about the Jewish society, that it's growing in Germany, and they are so proud that the Jewish society is flourishing and so integrated. But I mean, I grew up in Germany. I never asked myself the question, am I integrated, am I not? Of course I am, right? I grew up here, I speak German, I went to a German school, I'm studying here. I don't have to move anywhere the German society wants me to be. That's what I think. Yeah, but I think, you know, for me as a filmmaker, it's quite a luxury position, because of course Germany is shaped by strong interest in Jewish themes, which is expressed in a desire for a vibrant Jewish culture in Germany. And it led, for many years, it led to a Jewish cultural offer that was primarily made or created by non-Jews for non-Jews. And it was, I mean, for many years they tried to fill the void which was left by the Holocaust by a great visibility of Jewish life in Germany, which led to klezmer festivals, Jewish film festivals, Jewish theater days, cultural events, and so on and so forth. But like, it was made by non-Jews for non-Jews, right? And now we're living in a time where this generation, like I said, is growing up, and they're speaking like the things are made by Jews for Jews. And that makes it interesting, because it's probably more authentic, and it's probably less theater play.
Yeah. Arkadij, I think what is really important is for us as a film festival and films that we show year round, your film is so much appreciated by so many different age groups. I think it's really important also that it is a film made by a young person. It's very much a focus in the film, and we use the film for screenings on dealing with anti-Semitism as well as the Holocaust. And definitely it is extremely well received and understood. And I want to thank you for that. It's so important, because we're looking to the next generation and how they debate, discuss, and think about these issues. So a big thank you.
Thank you. Nothing to thank for. It's great. You know, I just wanted to say, when I made the film, I always thought if it will be successful in Germany, because it deals with such a German Jewish, you know, topic, and for me it was quite, I never expected it to be so successful abroad. I mean, one thing is Europe, but we also won awards, like audience awards, in Southeast Asia, in Japan, in India. It was all over in South America, in the States, and it's like so weird for me to see. And so it's great. I mean, like, the more people like the film and watch it and work with it, the greater, right?
And I think you've touched on a very global, international topic, you know, so it very much is understood and well received. So a huge thank you.
Thank you.